Big news today on the Wu flu front. Merck has announced that they have come out with a new antiviral drug, which looks very promising based on their tests, something like a 50% reduction in death. And the Premier of New South Wales down in Australia, the state which contains Sydney, which I believe is Australia's largest city, might be Melbourne, actually, I can't remember. But either way, a big and important state down in Australia has had to resign over her ties to Big Pharma. So I'm not really sure which one to start with or how to integrate these two, but I can't avoid either one of them. I need to talk about them both. So I guess I'll start with Merck, because Merck, that name might sound familiar to you, because Merck are the same people who brought you Ivermectin, that terrible horse drug that Republicans take and have been overdosing on for months, that drug. Well, Merck, because they care so much about their customers, and they always put their customers ahead of their own financial self-interest, a few months ago, you might recall, came out with a statement and said, oh my gosh, don't ever take Ivermectin for the Wu flu. Ivermectin's a very dangerous drug, and nobody would ever take that. And if you prescribe that, you're a bad doctor. And whoever would take that, you're insane. And so don't do that. Don't take our drugs that we make. And at the time, a lot of people probably thought, wow, that's a pretty strong statement coming from the people who make it. If not even the people who make Ivermectin want people to take it, that must mean that this whole idea that Ivermectin is an effective treatment for the Wu flu is totally deranged. Because if anybody has a financial self-interest in promoting Ivermectin, you would think it would be Merck, right? Wrong. You see, Ivermectin is out of patent. There are generics available. Merck has made their money off of Ivermectin. It's an old drug, and the only way the drug companies make money is by continuing to make new drugs that they can patent and sell and have a monopoly on. Because once they lose their monopoly, then they no longer enjoy, these massive profits and markups that you get because there's too much competition. Because it's pretty easy to formulate drugs once you know what the formula is. That is. So these companies like to have new drugs that they own the patent to, that they have a monopoly on, so that they can sell it at a much higher price. That's their business model. And so what Merck didn't say in their statement condemning Ivermectin a few months ago is that they were working on a new drug to treat the Wu flu. And it would be very inconvenient for them. It would be not in their financial self-interest for an older drug that they already produced, Ivermectin, to be found to be safe and effective, to borrow a phrase, at treating symptoms or, the cause of the Wu flu. Because then Ivermectin would be a direct competitor to their new drug they want to produce and sell. And that wouldn't make them very much money at all, would it? Who would buy this expensive brand new drug when they could buy Ivermectin if it truly worked? So it's very important for Merck that this idea never gets off the ground, whether it's true or not. You don't want people even looking into it, because if there's at all a possibility that it does work, these folks are going to be out a lot of money, whatever they've invested already into this Wu flu antiviral treatment. And additionally, they'll be out, whatever potential profits they might have made. And so now that the horse dewormer has been effectively smeared, people, aren't allowed to take it unless they're crazy conspiracy theorists. No reputable doctor would ever prescribe it. Now Merck can come out with their media-approved antiviral drug, which Wall Street is just in love with today. You got what's his name? Guy on the board of Pfizer with the slick back, greasy hair. Scott Gottlieb. I can't believe I had to to Google that. I kept thinking Scott Wapner. I thought, no, that's the wrong CNBC douchebag. Scott Gottlieb, former FDA commissioner, now sits on the board of Pfizer, which is slobbering all over himself this morning. He's talking about how wonderful this Merck drug is. Oh my gosh. And again, I'm not here to say that ivermectin works, or that this new drug that Merck is coming out with doesn't work. I don't know that. It's above my pay grade. I don't really. I mean, I do care. I mean, obviously, it's important to know, what works and what doesn't. But that's not really relevant to this conversation. All I'm pointing out are the conflicts of interest, and these are the kinds of conflicts that people just don't like to acknowledge. They don't like to examine incentives. They like happy talk, and that's unfortunate. People really do not like to think, and when you challenge them to think, they lash out at you in anger. And the same goes for the premier down in New South Wales. She was accused 2 weeks ago, and again, I don't know if this is true, but apparently there's an ongoing corruption probe regarding her tenure, or her premiership, put it that way. And somebody, publicly accused her, another politician, a couple weeks ago, of imposing these strict vaccine mandates, which would essentially deny people their very humanity, at the behest of lobbyists associated with Pfizer and AstraZeneca. And it is a pretty big accusation. And so is it coincidental that 2 weeks after this very, very troubling accusation was leveled at her by a political opponent, that she was, participating in these, in violating people's civil liberties, not because she was just a normal tyrant who thought that she was doing what was right, even if she was totally violating people's human rights, but rather she was just doing it because she was the puppet of a big pharma lobbyist. You might say, well, it's kind of splitting hairs to try and make that call one way or the other. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. She's a terrible person who belongs probably in The Hague, but at least in a jail somewhere. And that's true, but it still matters. It matters for waking up normies who think that, well, the government, they just want to do what's best for us. They have our best interests at heart. Because that is the most absurd lie, I think, that has ever come out of the French Revolution. I think that it's a terrible misappropriation of the writings of Rousseau, this idea of the general will and the state, oh my gosh, it's just doing what's best for everybody. Even though that in and of itself is an evil idea, it sounds kind of nice if you don't think that hard about it. But even still, it's so far from the truth. No matter whether you have a nominally elected aristocracy or a traditional landed aristocracy, the elites act in their own self-interest, always. And rarely are these elites ultra-altruistic people whose own self-interest is synonymous with the interest of the common man. By and large, people do not put their voters first. They don't think that way. It's inhuman. This is why power corrupts. It's a cliche for a reason, because it's true. I had a Spanish teacher once who made a comment to the class that always stuck with me. She said, stereotypes exist because they're usually true. And in this case, that's absolutely true. And unfortunately, a lot of people in the West don't understand that. Folks in Latin America and the Middle East, they understand that their politicians are corrupt dirtbags. People in America understand that better than a lot of places in the West. But a place like Australia, there's not nearly enough animus towards politicians, and that's why this is allowed to happen, because this ridiculous fraud, who is quite potentially a big pharma puppet, was using her power to enrich the clients of this lobbyist. She was using the force of the state, the iron fist. She was, I guess she stopped short of literally locking up the unvaxxed, although I believe she was considering that. She was considering house arrest for unvaxxed people. That was the next stage. But again, it was going to get there anyway. As long as people like this remain in power, they're going to keep escalating the situation. California has just mandated that all school children are going to need to get the Wu flu shots. And again, when you have this booster situation, that means that your kid is going to get a shot in the arm every 6 months with some new concoction from the boys at Pfizer and Moderna. Now back to Australia. Could this be a watershed moment? I mean, this really is the first scalp that the anti-lockdown crowd has to its name. Could they potentially start taking down other politicians too? I don't know. This could be a one-off. She could just be, a sacrificial lamb. Or this could be the start of this whole situation coming unglued. Because if people who thought that the government really was doing this for their health, and there's a lot of people who are that dumb. I know it's hard to imagine, but there are a lot of people who are that dumb, especially in Australia. If all of a sudden they're woken up and they find out, oh wait, this woman really was just doing it for money, that's going to make them question a whole lot more. These are red-pilling moments. And so that, I would think today, if you're in Australia, you should feel a bit of hope. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.